If you love Anthropologie, but it's just really not in the budget, this video is just for you. We're gonna look all through Anthropologie's website as well as in stores, get loads of inspiration, and then we're gonna head to the thrift store to see what we can come up with for a whole lot less. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. If you are a lover of Anthropologie, odds are you have somewhat of an eclectic style because there really is a nice mix of everything. You have your somewhat more vintage, feminine pieces all mixed in with those really rustic pieces. Moving along now to the thrift store, one piece of rustic decor that I pretty much never pass up is anything that is live edge wood. Live edge pieces from places like Anthropologie and other high-end retailers can be quite expensive. So whenever I come across it at the thrift store, I always make sure to pick it up. You guys remember when I found this piece here. The only thing really wrong with this was that the corner was starting to break. A super simple fix with just some wood glue and some rubber bands or a way to attach those pieces back together. In this case, I used this piece for a bath tray, but you could turn this into an entryway table. Depending on the type of live edge wood that you find will kind of dictate what it can become in your space. In the artwork section of my thrift store, I found this live edge piece here that was just a welcome sign. It was just $3. If that fits in with your aesthetic, perfect. There's not really anything that needs to be done to this necessarily, but I really wanted to turn this into an entryway shelf for my sister's entryway. Step one is of course just disinfecting and cleaning it, and then I was hoping that I would be able to peel back on those letters, but unfortunately I did have to sand them off, which just took a little bit of elbow grease. I was able to remove pretty much all of the lettering within 30 minutes. To even out some of the discoloration where the letters used to be, I just decided to go over it with some taupe paint, just some spray paint. I just gave it one light dusting, so then that way when I went in to apply my wax, it gave a more even finish. I added one coat of wax to the top as well as all around the sides just to give it a more complete and finished look. If the wood that I found had been thicker, I would have definitely just tried to make it like a floating shelf. But because it was quite thin, I wanted to go with the L brackets instead, just to make sure it would be nice and secure and wouldn't snap. You can get L brackets anywhere. I found these for just about $3 a piece at Lowe's. Taking a closer look at my sister's entryway, the table just seemed to be disproportionate to the wall that it was sitting in front of. But I also understand why she didn't do a longer furniture piece that also had this depth, because then she wouldn't be able to open her front door. But by instead choosing something that was thinner but longer, it just occupies this space in a really beautiful organic way, but it was done so affordably because I shopped secondhand. If you have been following this channel, you guys know that I really do try to use only real florals as much as possible, but there are some times where you just need to use faux, and that can definitely be true when it comes to wreaths. Wreaths from high-end stores can be super expensive. So if you can find, even if it's just a garland at the thrift store that can become a wreath, I always recommend picking it up. The other thing I want to point out is how full the wreaths are from these high-end stores. So in order to get the same fullness, you need a lot of the same flowers. One thing that you can definitely find this time of year especially is once the weddings are over, you will see collections after collections of wedding centerpieces. And generally speaking, they're a lot of the same type of flower and definitely better quality since it was used on such an important day. Now, I've been married for a long time, so I definitely don't have a use for all of these wedding centerpieces, but I can definitely use these florals again into making a really full and beautiful wreath. For your wreath form, if you want to kind of expedite the process, I prefer foam just because then you can literally just stick the flowers right into the foam. If ever I see these at the thrift store, I always pick them up, even if I have to remove florals the first time around. Putting an emphasis on the fullness, so doing one larger hoop wreath form and then a smaller one to fit on the inside will give that fullness that you'll see often in high-end stores. Then I'm also just going to add in these hydrangeas that I also picked up from the bins. You would be surprised how many really great stems you can find at the Goodwill bins, so just make sure that you're really digging and checking through, especially at the bottom. Using some spray adhesive as well as a UV protectant spray to keep these leaves staying nice and green. Whenever I skip this step, it seems seems like my leaves always end up turning blue by the end of the season. So just doing this little step really helps to keep your wreath looking good all season long. While I definitely love the wreaths from Williams-Sonoma and Anthropologie more, it's hard for me to justify spending that much when I know eventually if I go to the Goodwill bins consistently, I can come out with something that looks really beautiful but on a budget. For the styrofoam balls that were actually holding the flowers, there are so many different things you can do with these, so before you just toss them out, try maybe wrapping some jute around it, or twine, or some sort of woven material, and it can really enhance your space during these summer months. However, I personally am going to keep these when Christmas rolls around. Some of the inspirations I've really been loving require larger ornaments, so this is a really inexpensive way to be able to do that. When it comes to the faux trees, there are those trees that you will see all the time at thrift stores, and then there are the ones that you don't see quite as often. So when I saw this bamboo tree here for just $4, I thought even if I don't love it in my space, I can definitely resell it for much more, especially when you compare it to these insane Anthropologie prices for faux trees. There are a few things that contribute to that really high price tag, and one of those things is scale. So how tall is the tree? A lot of these trees sold on high-end sites are at least 7 feet tall, which this one was as well. But while I thought the tree was pretty good quality, it unfortunately did not come in a planter. Large scale planters from places like Anthropologie can be hundreds of dollars. I have a lot of luck finding small planters at the thrift store, but never large planters large enough for a 7-foot tree at least. The only thing that I found that was even remotely close to being a planter shape and the scale that I would need for this tree was this plastic container here. The challenge here is taking something that is obviously plastic and making it look like it's ceramic. So I just threw everything I had in my stash at it. Leftover grout, leftover concrete, leftover spackle. Because I found this plastic container at the bins and everything that is made of this material is priced at $1.29 per pound, so this ended up just being about $4. And I'm just going to take supplies that I've already had that I would actually like to use up, so then that way it's just not sitting collecting dust in my stash. But I just still wasn't totally happy with the end result. So I decided to grab a little bit of this peel and stick braided trim from my stash. I had just enough to wrap around one of the sections to give it a more planter-like look. Although it is peel and stick, I don't feel that adhesive is strong enough, so I like to add additional adhesive and then just tape it in place. Went over it again just one more time with some Henry's Feather finish to give it a stone-like look. Once that dried, I sanded it down with 220 grit sandpaper just to give a more finished look. Some of the peaks made it feel really DIY, and I wanted it to have an overall smooth consistency but still feel very textural. A no-fail paint combination for me is to use Magnolia Home's Shiplap spray paint. Because this is a chalk style spray paint, I definitely would not use this on a planter that I was going to be putting outdoors. Once that had then dried, I then just like to take a paper towel that's just slightly damp with some watered down antiquing wax just to give it that aged look. Now, of course, it's not an exact dupe, but if you are on a budget, but you really love those rustic, large scale planters, see what you can come up with at the thrift store. I find plastic containers, plastic waste bins all the time at the bins. So you would be surprised what you can come across if you go consistently. If you love Anthropologie, odds are you loved some scalloped decor. This is something that you'll see in several different capacities on their website, through baskets, through textiles, and many, many more. Scalloped baskets is something I do come across pretty often at the thrift store. It's just almost always the wrong color. The scalloped or ruffled quality of this basket is really subtle, but it's just enough to make you look twice and make your space just feel a little bit more interesting. How to change the color of a thrifted basket 101. So I either like to start out with Magnolia Home's Shiplap spray paint that I mentioned earlier, or some sort of a taupe spray paint just to kind of neutralize everything. Then you want to take a brush that looks like this with some watered down antiquing wax. That really is going to give you the most natural look because baskets aren't just one flat color. There's a lot of different variations in color happening within baskets. So by watering down the wax and using a brush that can really get in all those nooks and crannies will just give you a really natural finish overall. Baskets like these are great because you can use them indoors or outdoors. They could be used as a planter, as a light fixture, as a waste bin, and definitely worth the 85 cents and 30 minutes to bring it back to life. Anthropologie is really known for having a beautiful candle collection, so whenever I find scalloped pieces like this that I can turn into a candle, definitely worth picking up. Now this one was originally $2, but then I found it at the Goodwill bin, so it's just 49 cents a pound. Taking one of my many half-used candles from my cupboard, and I'm just going to repurpose that candle into this container instead, giving it, again, a new life. And that is just one of many examples. There are so many different ways that you can take thrifted items and transform them into candles or candle holders that you might find at Anthropologie. For example, anything tinted glass is really gonna give that Anthropologie-like look. I also found these battery operated with a remote flameless candles, which I just prefer on my open shelving. It just makes me feel a lot more comfortable. These tinted glass candle holders were just 50 cents a piece, just needed to be cleaned. They were in otherwise perfect condition. My theory on why these never used brand new in a box candles were donated was because the person who bought them didn't realize they require C batteries, and they're generally a little bit more expensive than AA batteries, but I already had 4, so it worked out perfect in this situation. Some of you may remember in my last video when I found this ruffled glass vase bowl situation, very reminiscent to things you can find at Anthropologie, Lulu, and Georgia, but you'll notice that the tint of the glass is almost identical to the tint from these glass candle holders that I just found, which is great because it adds to the cohesion of my space, not adding the exact same items, but the same material. The ultimate goal when you're styling your shelves is to create balance. So you just want to make sure that when you have items that are the same material, that you're spreading them out on opposite sides, not right next to each other, not one on top of each other, and that will really aid in your shelf styling. With Anthropologie, it's all in the details. So when you find pieces that have any etching or carving, anything like that will automatically give your space a more collected feel. So I found this snuffer at the bins, paid less than $1 for it, and I think it's a great addition to any space that has a candle nearby. Out of all the stores we dissect for these dupe videos, I would say Anthropologie definitely has some of the most unique lighting of all. But I do like to pay attention to themes. So what kind of materials are they using? What shapes are they using? Paper lighting and sphere-shaped lighting is a very popular design through Anthropologie. I find these paper lanterns all the time at the thrift store. They're really inexpensive, especially because they are so lightweight. So if ever I find one that's big enough to be a light fixture, I'll just, instead of use it for a lantern, just build it like you typically would and insert those metal prongs in the slots. And because it already has a clip to attach it to the wall mounted component from your ceiling, it can just click right on there. Just make sure you're providing enough spacing between the paper lantern and your actual light bulb, and just make sure also that the light bulbs that you're using are LED. If you are in a small space or you're trying to decorate a small space, I always recommend using sconces where you can. So I found both of these sconces here that were literally in perfect condition, had all of the pieces with them, and because all of the orange tags were 50% off, I paid just $5 for both of them total. While they do look really similar to these from Pottery Barn, I'm pretty sure these are from Amazon, so I will link these in the description box below. If you want to make these feel a little bit more Anthropologie inspired, you can of course just swap the shade, but because I wanted it to be just a little bit more mainstream, they were fine the way they were. Using these light bulbs with the remote are the absolute best ones from Amazon. They're super inexpensive and they give off the most just natural, warm lighting. Just like the lighting, same goes for the mirrors with Anthropologie. It's taking something that is otherwise very basic and just adding a little something to it to make it feel a little bit more interesting. You can find really beautiful mirrors that are good quality at the thrift store and sometimes brand new. I found this swivel mirror for just $7 at the Hartville thrift shop that was otherwise in perfect condition. Little disappointed when I got home because the swivel component wasn't attached to it, so I just had to do a little bit of problem solving. Grabbed these vintage inspired swag hooks from Lowe's so that way the prongs would have something to sit inside of, and because these can hold up to 30 pounds, it was the perfect fit for a mirror like this one. Another type of mirror that's really common with Anthropologie is woven mirrors, and this is something that you can find often at thrift stores, but also Facebook Marketplace has a really nice selection. I paid just $6 for this mirror. Adding woven pieces to your walls can really just make your space feel a little bit more interesting and textural, but on a budget when you shop secondhand. Last but not least, let's talk about textiles. So again, it's just those added details that make things just feel a little bit more special and unique. But you can find those same things, guys, at the thrift store. Like I found this bath mat. Now I can really only get so excited. It's just a bath mat, but this is a chenille embroidered bath mat that was brand new from the thrift store that cost just about $1.50. Something similar at Anthropologie is going to cost way more, and you just don't have to spend that to have an equally beautiful space. Especially for summer textiles, quilts, blankets, picnic blankets, all of those sorts of things you can find at the thrift store. You don't need to go to Anthropologie or Zara Home and spend a fortune. At the Goodwill Bins location that I shop at, all of the comforters and quilts are just $4 a piece. Definitely has a more masculine vibe to it. Originally from Nautica, thought this would be perfect for our Father's Day picnic, and again, was just $4. Any felt organization that is good quality and in really good condition, I always recommend picking up, because at Anthropologie, you're gonna pay 10 times more for essentially the same thing. Found this bocce set that was perfect for me and my family to play on Father's Day. You can find so many yard games at the thrift store for a fraction of what you will pay on Amazon. About a month ago, I found this really beautiful wood picnic tray table in Phoenix for just a few dollars, but baskets, linens, little picnic accessories, you just don't need to spend what Anthropologie is charging. You can find really beautiful things at your thrift stores. More of a summer print that I want to point out is anything that is cabana styled is definitely going to give you that summer feeling, and you can always find that at the thrift store. I come across this in so many different variations. Depending on your needs, you can definitely eventually come across it if you go to your thrift store consistently. Same deal for the clothing. Polka dots I think is always fun, especially for summer. I found this really beautiful polka dot dress. Just thinking about removing those sleeves there, I loved the buttons and wanted to, instead of make it a dress, into a little romper. Perfect for summer and less than $1. You can find so many great pieces that are brand new with tags at your thrift stores if you just do a little bit of digging. For example, I found 2 of these visor hats for summer. They're not Anthropologie, but they are Free People. They're usually like $30 a piece. I paid probably $1 for both of them. I could resell these, but I'm choosing to keep them for myself, as well as this little summer bucket hat. It was brand new with tags, so instead of going to Anthropologie and spending $48, I can instead go to the Goodwill Bins and spend like 48 cents and get a nearly identical look. With all that being said, that really wraps it up for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments which hack or find or project was your favorite this week, and I will see you back here next Sunday. Bye for now.